Many homeowners have a significant portion of their wealth tied up in their home. And in fact, homeowners on average tend to be much wealthier than people who are renters. However, for most of them, that wealth that is just sitting in their home is not being put to good use. In fact, possibly they could achieve financial independence just by selling their house. And that's exactly what we're going to discuss today. Stay till the end because we're going to calculate basically how much your house could produce you in income while you're financially independent if you were to sell it. So can you sell your house and achieve financial independence? The short answer to this, I think, is yes, and most definitely. Especially if you live currently in a high cost of living area where the price of your home is very, very high, then I think it's more than possible to sell your house and achieve financial independence. To best illustrate this, let me give you an example that hits a little bit close to home for me. So originally, I am from Southern California originally, east of Los Angeles. Well, Los Angeles itself is very, very expensive for housing, all right? It's not the most expensive in the country, but it's still pretty expensive for housing there. Let's give an example of someone who's lived in Los Angeles for the past 10 years and bought a home there 10 years ago. According to Zillow's data, the average cost for a house in Los Angeles 10 years ago was about $410,000. So that's the example that I'm going to use here. So someone bought their house in Los Angeles 10 years ago for $410,000. They put down the standard, 20% down payment on their house, and therefore they would have put down $82,000. That's 20%. Then that would leave them with a $328,000 mortgage. I calculated that about 10 years later, if they were just making the minimum payments on that mortgage, then they would have about $266,000 left on their mortgage. So if they had to pay off their mortgage all at once, it would have to be $266,000 10 years later. Now, if we also fast forward to 10 years later, in recent times, according to Zillow's data, those houses that were worth $410,000 10 years ago, they are now worth an average of $880,000. So if they were to sell their home now, they would get about $880,000, before all the expenses are taken into account. With $266,000 left on their mortgage, plus selling fees, here's how much they would probably about have after selling their home. Selling fees, on average, tend to be anywhere from 5 to 6% of the home's value. So we'll go with the higher end of 6%. So 6% of that would be $53,000 in selling fees in order to get their house sold. So we take the $880,000 selling price, we subtract out the remaining balance on the mortgage of $266,000, and we subtract out the selling fees of $53,000, and that leaves us with $561,000. So theoretically, in this oversimplified example, they would get $561,000, cash in their pocket from the sale of their home after they lived in this high cost living area for 10 years. This is going to contribute significantly to them being able to become financially independent, but probably not in the same area. And we're going to talk about that next. But before we move on to that, please, if you're liking this video so far, make sure you like it and give it a thumbs up. It really does help me out, and I really do appreciate that. Plus, it helps send this video to other people that need to see it. And believe me, more people do need to see this video, so thank you so much for hitting that like button. Now let's take that profit that they made from the sale of their home and see how much income that can produce. But first we need to talk about taxes. So more specifically, federal taxes. Now here's some good news here. The IRS currently has some pretty good tax benefits when it comes to the sale of your primary residence. So right now, if you sell your primary residence, you can exclude up to $250,000 of capital gains if you are single, and up to $500,000 of capital gains if you are married filing jointly. In our example, we said that they would make $561,000, right? But this doesn't mean that they're going to get taxed on $561,000, because here's how you calculate your capital gain when you sell your home. Now again, this is going to be an oversimplified example, so it's not exactly correct. But if we take the selling price of their home, we're going to take $880,000. Then we have to subtract out their tax basis, and that's going to be the amount that they bought their home for, plus any improvements that they made, like major improvements that they made to the home. Now we'll assume just to make it easier that they didn't make any significant improvements. Okay, so we're going to take the original amount that they bought it for, which was $410,000. So we take that $880, we subtract out the $410,000, and then we subtract out the selling costs. So how much it cost them to sell their home, which was $53,000. And by subtracting those things out, their actual taxable gain in this case is $417,000. Now, most likely, it's actually going to be less than that because of capital improvements and some other things that go into calculating your adjusted tax basis. But for this simplified example, if it's a married couple filing jointly, they're not going to pay any income taxes, federal income taxes on the sale of their home, because it's less than $500,000, and that is pretty cool. Now, how much income can we produce using this $561,000? Well, the answer to that question is very, very complicated. But if we use, the general rule of thumb, which is 4%, we can multiply $561,000 by 4%. And that's the 4% rule for how much you can safely withdraw and make your money last for a very, very long time. And that $561,000, if they were to invest it, that's going to produce about $22,240. Now we can divide that by 12 and put that into monthly terms, and that's going to be a monthly income of $1,870 that's produced from that $561,000 that is invested. Now, since they are homeowners, that means they're probably a lot wealthier than most other people, and therefore they were probably investing a little bit on the side too, not just paying into their home. So even if they were investing a little bit and they had a little bit of money, this is going to contribute significantly to allowing them to become financially independent. If they had an additional $300,000 worth of investments, let's say from their workplace 401ks, in their IRAs, maybe some taxable investments, whatever it may be. Let's say they had $300,000 of other investments. If we use a 4% rule on that as well, that's going to produce $12,000 per year or an additional $1,000 per month. Now we can add that $561,000 that produced $1,870 per month plus the additional $1,000 that we just calculated, and that's going to give us a monthly income of $2,870 to work with here. That's going to produce about $34,440 for them to live on while they're financially independent. And that might not sound like a lot. It's definitely not going to sound like a lot to them when they're coming from an area such as Los Angeles, a high cost of living area. But let me put up something on the screen for you really quick. And this shows like some average cost of living throughout the entire United States. So you can see that in many parts of the country, it is actually very affordable to live on that income. In many parts of the country, you can live on that pretty comfortably, especially if you're looking into the central interior of the United States. And here's basically how they're gonna make it happen, how they're gonna live on that, let's say $34,000 per year. First off, they're gonna have to move. They're going to have to do some geo arbitrage, as we like to call it. They're gonna have to move from their high cost of living area in Los Angeles. They sold their home, and now they're gonna have to move into a lower cost of living area. They can move into a low cost of living area, rent a small apartment, or they can buy a smaller house, because that's part two. Part two is downsizing, depending on how large their house was before. Downsizing and just living in a smaller home is gonna keep your expenses so much lower because everything is cheaper when you're in a smaller place. Additionally, if we're talking about a couple married filing dwelling, just having one car, only one form of transportation, one vehicle to pay off of, that is going to be a lot cheaper than having two vehicles. It's probably going to be half the price. And now that they are financially independent, maybe they don't have a regular work schedule, they're going to have a lot less costs when it comes to the transportation. They're going to have a lot less commuting costs. They're going to have less costs for maintaining the vehicle because they're doing less driving, and everything is going to be lower cost. And pretty much doing just those three things, geo arbitrage, moving to a low cost living area, living in a smaller home or a smaller apartment, and having only one vehicle for transportation, that's going to be a pretty easy path to financial independence, even on a seemingly low income of $34,000 per year. That's how you can sell your house and achieve financial independence. But there are still some other things that you can do in order to live a good life on a low income. And if you want to learn more on how to do that, you need to watch another video that I created, a full guide to cutting your expenses so that you can achieve financial independence. If you haven't watched that video already, make sure that you watch that video. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'm Zach from OnCashflow.com, and I hope to see you next time.